Hello, and welcome back to another YouTube video. If you're new to my channel, hello there, and you can call me Rabia. I like to do art and storytelling around here. This video is actually the second part of creating character designs for, hopefully, a book I want to publish one day called my storybook. If you haven't checked that video out yet, I do really recommend watching it in order to understand what's going on, and I've put the link in the description box below. Either way, here's a quick run-through. My storybook follows Anne, a young teenager who dreams of becoming a great story writer. Anne has this dream of writing the greatest grandiose story of all time. However, not many people buy her work, and this causes her to believe that she must make sure every single one of her stories is absolutely perfect, and that she must follow what other people want to see written rather than what she wants to write about. And so Anne becomes terrified of writing the stories that she loves in the first place, and almost gives up on writing altogether. However, one day, that all changes when she finds herself stuck in one of her own stories, where she must find her way back to the real world while learning that making mistakes is okay, and that she shouldn't let the fear stop her from doing something she loves. In that video, I also introduced Agnes, one of Anne's characters, a jolly, reckless adventurer whom she meets in her storybook, who helps overcome her fear of making mistakes. Together, they embark on a magical journey, agreeing to use the legendary stone that Anne has mysteriously come into her storybook with, in order to open the barrier of the Isle of Dreams. So that way, Anne can wish her way back to where she came from, while encountering new friends, obstacles, and foes along the way. In this semester of my animation course, I had more freedom in choosing what I wanted to do. So I decided to create 2 small character sheets for 2 other characters in the story, which I have been developing in the past few months. Before we begin though, I just want to mention that I actually started making the first character sheet in February, so this is actually for the spring semester of my animation course. But I've only recently finished the second character sheet this June. And if any of you guys know me personally, you'll know that February to June is one of the busiest times of the year for me, filled with a bigger load of schoolwork, extracurriculars, events, family travel, and preparation for boothing at Comic-Con. So this video is kind of late. And because I was in such a big time crunch, I had to reuse a lot of recent sketches I did of these 2 characters prior to drawing them in these character sheets, either in my sketchbook or in a separate digital canvas. Also, I won't be mentioning too much about these characters because they are a bit further into the plot, and I don't want to spoil too much about the story. Lastly, I just want to thank you all for all the lovely, kind support and love I've gotten on my first few videos. As of time of recording, my first original story-related video has about 900 views, which is just crazy to think about for me. With all that said, let's start with the video. Alright, so for our first character of the video, we have another one of Anne's own characters, Charlie. When drawing Charlie, I feel like I had such a hard time trying to get him to look like what I imagined him to look like. And I felt like I had a pretty hard time trying to get him to actually look like a child as I don't draw children that often. And I have drawn children in the past, but I feel like I kind of lost that skill now. Full name, Charlie Robinson, is a bold, playful, curious, confident, and charming 11 to 9-year-old boy who loves making machinery and inventions. Other than his inventions, he's always read his father's adventuring journals, hoping to go on some fun, risk-filled adventure too. He lives in the Isle of the Great Mangrove Clock Tower, or just Mangrove City, which is well known for making machinery and inventions, and he lives there with his mother and his father. Being a kid, he often loves making people solve jokes or riddles, even if they need something important from him, just for the fun of it. Despite only being a child, he's now grown quite the big reputation as being one of the best inventors in the city, winning a couple of inventing competitions and selling his inventions in his free time, along with a shared space in his mother's bakery, making the Robinsons Bakery, and now inventions, quite the hotspot in the city. Something to mention about Charlie is that he and Agnes's fathers were actually great adventuring buddies, and the two friends, along with Agnes as a little girl, used to go on all kinds of adventures together. Charlie, from reading his father's old adventuring journals, knows a lot about Agnes and looks up to her a lot, wishing to go on risky adventures just like her and maybe use his own inventions to save the day. When Anne and Agnes stop by the Mangrove City, they meet Charlie, and wanting to join an adventure, he eventually ends up joining them in their journey. As for his design, I always imagined him to kind of look a bit childlike and playful, but still sharp and bold at the same time. So, although it might not be that visible, I tried to integrate a bit of sharp shapes into his design, such as in his vest. And because he does look up to Agnes, I decided to give him a similar style in the sense of the hats and boots and goggles, while still trying to make it look like they do different things. I tried integrating squares into his design to also show a small sense of connection between him and Agnes, such as the shape of his boots or small pocket. Some of you might recognize the sketch that I used from my sketchbook over here, where I first explored a bit of Charlie. And I ended up taking that sketch and coloring it digitally, and then ended up basing the main pose upon that drawing, and basically refining it. I first initially planned to use this outfit variation when I made the 3 in my sketchbook. And I also tried these 2 other new variations when drawing him, but I ended up choosing this one as I felt like it matches his personality quite well. For his expressions, I actually ended up changing one of them just for the sake of temporarily having a front view of him, like a front angle. And I essentially had the idea where he'd be like looking up at someone and maybe he's like, please, or something. For colors, I ended up choosing this kind of green along with some light browns or khaki, I think it's what it's called. But yeah. Something fun to add is I actually did a lot of the coloring and shading process while on an airplane, so that's that for you. Anyways, that's all for Charlie. Although I feel like I had a bit of trouble with making him look like a child and getting him to look like how I envisioned, I'm still very happy with how everything turned out. For another one of Anne's characters, we have Finnian. Finnian is the 27-year-old prince heir of the Oceanic Isle, or also known as the Mermaid Isle by humans. Finnian is curious, reserved, and open-minded. He's pretty popular, and many merfolk treat him as some kind of celebrity, often following him just to become friends with him. However, when his fans do meet him, they often question his deep curiosity in exploring and discovering the world, his new ideas, his curiosity in why things happen, and experimentation with traditional mer potion making. However, Finnian would much rather do his own thing and follow his own path, exploring the wonder of both the depths of the ocean and the surface world. He's also more open-minded and kinder towards humans visiting the Oceanic Isle, such as Anne, Agnes, and Charlie, compared to the majority of mermaids in the Isle, who tend to believe that every single human is a terrible and greedy person. Finnian was pretty much born into the expectation of becoming king one day, with his father often pressuring him to carry out his princely duties, attend gatherings, which Finnian doesn't really enjoy. Within the story, he meets Anne and the rest of the group when they visit the Oceanic Isle, and later decides to help them on their journey. And yeah, that's all I'll say on Finnian for now. Something I feel like I had a lot of trouble with drawing Finnian here, or Finnian in general, is trying to get his hair right. I usually don't struggle too much with drawing hair consistently after I drew a character a couple of times, but I feel like Finnian's messy hair was being quite stubborn with me, despite drawing lots of sketches of him prior, and I kept having to restyle it over and over and over again. But I feel like I eventually got it the way I wanted to in his sheet in the end. When I first drew Finnian in my sketchbook, I based him on the way I draw mer characters in my art style when I drew this random other mer character over here. I actually ended up redesigning that character from this drawing recently, but I'll have to talk about her another time. For mer characters, I always thought it would be really cool if they had certain elements of the ocean stick to their body, kind of like whales in a way, and like also get stuck in their hair. So I added things like barnacles and shells all over Finnian and the other character design I made. I also thought about if maybe if commoner merfolk used seaweed as clothing, while wealthier merfolk might use shell-like material for clothes. And maybe they wear them in different, ways and styles. As for Finnian, I always imagined him to have messy-ish, shoulder-length hair. So that's what I did. Now, Finnian is actually the first character sheet I made with 6 expressions ever since my animation mentor suggested it. So I decided to keep the variations and expressions on 2 different layers, just so I wouldn't have to, shrink down the expressions to lower resolution, which I didn't want. And I honestly think it would have been better to format everything by making 2 separate canvases instead, one with variations and another one with the main pose and expressions. So I kind of ended up with 2 different images in the end, with 6 expressions and then one with 3 expressions and variations. In the future, however, I do hope to go back and give Anne, Agnes, and Charlie more proper expressions and format these character sheets a bit better. For his expressions, I drew 3 from scratch, and I based 3 off of recent sketches I've done of him that I quite liked. The first one is kind of like this irritated sort of look, while the second one might be him thinking about, I don't know, maybe what ingredients to put in a potion, perhaps. For the third one, I pictured maybe he's enjoying like a little pearl, like a sparkling pearl. Maybe he discovered it from a shell, I suppose. For the fourth expression, I went for like a fun surprise look, and this was actually from a unfinished storyboard I made a while back. Then after that expression, I made this expression of like, I guess, King Finnian on portrait day, which I'll talk a little bit about later. And finally, a kind of nervous, anxious expression on the bottom left. When doing his variations, I gave him simple seaweed wraps, I guess, at first, along with a few potions hanging on a rope. Something new I added in his digital variations was the rope, hanging with the potions, and a seashell necklace. I don't know, I just thought it would look nice, and the sandy color would, complement all the blue throughout his design. For the second variation, I decided to experiment with a more princely-like outfit, if that makes sense. It would probably be like the typical prince outfit with shell armor shoulder blades and a little seaweed satchel. As for the last design, I was a bit inspired by a sketch I did a while back while traveling. And while I was on my travels, we saw a couple of paintings and portraits of rulers and kings, and I got a bit inspired by that, and I ended up drawing this king-like drawing of Finnian, or like portrait, just on a whim. And maybe perhaps he's tired on portrait day or something, is what I was thinking. So when I got back from my trip and I did these variations, I decided to add the same outfit I used in that drawing and use that as a expression as well. I also gave him like this seaweed coat, perhaps. Along with some like sparkling pearl garments and the royal crown of the Oceanic Isle. In the end, I eventually chose the first variation, as I feel like it shows a lot of his free-spiritedness and how he doesn't particularly like the association of, I guess, having the reputation of being a prince, if that makes sense. I also tried integrating a kind of triangular shape motif in his design, like in his hair, just like all spiky and stuff, his fins, and the way the seaweed wraps around his chest. So yeah, that's Finnian. Although I feel like I struggled a lot with his hair especially, I'm still very happy with the final sheets and how the colors ended up looking like in the end. And yeah, make sure to let me know what you guys think. Well, that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for sticking around with me and supporting my channel. It really means a lot to me. As always, please do let me know your thoughts, any feedback, or suggestions you have in the comments. And I would love to hear about what kind of videos you'd guys like to see in the future. I hope you guys have a great day and see you another time. Bye bye!